All right. Very good evening, everyone. Welcome to webinar 9 of Navigating Net Zero series. Today we are talking about ESG regulation in the Middle East. We have till now covered about 7 topics and about 8 webinars. Uh, Primarily, we've spoken about carbon accounting, scope 1, 2, 3 emissions, emission factors, as well as talking about specific ESG regulations in United States and Europe, as well as India. Today, we are transitioning to the Middle East. We are specifically going to talk about the ESG regulations that are applicable to both private and public sector companies. Now, we started this journey in September of 2024. I think we've come a long way. Few rules. I think you can, let's try to make this session interactive. If you've got any questions, please raise your hand and speak. You can also post your question in the chat, or you can, ask the question in the Q&A section. Today, we are going to cover the following topics. We are going to talk about ESG. We're going to talk about what are the major developments in the Middle East. We are then going to transition towards what is happening in individual countries in the Middle East. And lastly, we'll talk about how somebody who is doing this for the first time can start their journey on ESG reporting. We'll also take the case of UAE and see how somebody can prepare themselves for reporting if they're in UAE. So that's going to be what we are discussing today. Let's jump in. Let's talk about evolution of ESG. This is something that we have covered in my previous webinars in depth. Right now, we'll talk about just the main core subject, wherein we talk about how ESG has transformed over the years. So you can clearly see there are four major developments in terms of ESG. This is when at first ESG was only social responsibility. This is during the 1890s when uh, the Chernobyl disaster happened and Interfaith Center on Corporate Responsibility was founded in 1973. This gave rise to an era of CSR, which is corporate social responsibility. CSR is something that is still seen in companies, wherein you've got CSR funds or CSR policies. Now, during this era, you see a lot of development happened. The first ESG Index Fund came in. Sustainalytics was founded, and this ultimately, all of this gave rise to what uh, ESG became next. So during the 2000 to 2015 is the period when actually a lot of development happened in the front of ESG. This is when a lot of frameworks were developed, frameworks like CDP, GRI, UNSDG, UNPRI, TCFD, and many others. Notably, this is the same time when Paris Agreement was signed in 2015 by 197 countries, which is 1.5 degrees C agreement. TCFD was also launched in 2025. All of this gave rise to ESG as a central business imperative. Now, ESG started becoming mainstream and businesses would integrate into their businesses. A lot of regulations also came in, regulations like EU taxonomy, SFDR, which is Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation, as well as CSRD, which came in 2024. Now, at the same time, when we talk about Middle East, two major development happened in Middle East, particularly the COP18 in Doha and COP28 in Dubai. The COP18 happened in November of 2012, whereas COP28 happened in November of 2023. During the COP18, I think it was the first COP hosted in any Middle Eastern country. The primary objective or achievement rather was that the progress on Bali Action Plan was achieved. Now here, Bali Action Plan primarily focused on sustainable finance, review, adaptation, and technology transfer for developing countries. This was also the time when the Kyoto Protocol extended its commitment to 2013 to 2020. This is the time when new emission targets were developed for developed countries. For COP28 in Dubai, uh, it revealed that there is insufficient progress on Paris Agreement goal. This is in 2023, very recent. Um, it clearly indicated that we need accelerated action in terms of climate reduction by 2030. This is the time when countries also agreed that there has to be global commitment to transition from fossil fuel. During this time, UAE pledged a 4.5 billion fund for African clean energy. And lastly, the announcement on unified ESG metrics for GCC listed countries by Gulf Exchange was a big deal. The Gulf Exchange announcement is something that you will see as a recurring theme across the regulations, particularly with respect to the stock markets in the Middle East. Some more development you can see in case of Abu Dhabi, the first MENA ESG rule for finance, which is climate risk disclosure, came in. For Saudi Arabia, it was the Green Initiative, which was linked to oil and gas. So oil and gas licenses were tied to ESG scores. Saudi Arabia also saw in 2022 a special ESG rule for Islamic finance. In 2023, UAE, world's first mandatory ESG for all free zone companies. This is also a big achievement. Followed by Oman, where it spoke about green as classification for transition energy projects. Again, in January 2023, the GCC Exchange Committee published a set of unified ESG metrics we have spoken about already. Now, in 2009, the Sustainable Stock Exchange Initiative came into play. This was led by the partners, the UNPRI, UNCTAD, UNGC, and IFC, with the mission to encourage stock exchanges to adopt ESG reporting rule for listed companies, ultimately helping investors access reliable, sustainable data. Now, the SSE initiative stock market initiative, and you can see this started in June of 2012 and till latest in December 2022, Oman had joined it. Let's transition to talk about the individual countries. We'll first talk about what are the regulations which are pertaining to private and public companies, and we'll also talk about the climate status in terms of net zero status and any other regulations or goals that are there for those countries. We'll start with UAE, United Arab Emirates. For the capital markets of UAE, we've got two entities, which is DFM and ADX. So the DFM, which is Dubai Financial Market, as well as the Abu Dhabi Securities Exchange, are governed by SCA, which is Securities and Commodities Authority. The SCA came up with a guide in 2020, which is Joint Stock Companies Governance Guide. Article 76 of this guide mandates companies to go with integrated reports. The rule got updated in 2024, wherein the integrated report also has to be supplemented by sustainability report. So indirectly, all the listed companies are supposed to do sustainability reporting in the form of integrated reports. Now, we know that UAE is part of Sustainable Stock Exchange Initiative. Both DFM and ADX are part of it. Both of them have come out with guides which are for ESG disclosure. So DFM has got DFM guide for ESG reporting 2023, whereas ADX releases in 2019. Quickly talking about these guides. So DFM guide, you can see there are about close to 30 metrics, which are broken down into environment, social, and governance. You can see GHG emissions and intensity, energy use and intensity, energy mix, water and effluent, waste, Environmental management, climate risk management and oversight, and biodiversity are the main component of environmental. In case of social, it is the CEO pay ratio, breakdown with staff, that means male female ratio, as well as others, employee turnover and new hires, gender diversity and equality, human rights, health and safety, and community engagement. In case of governance, board diversity, board independence, collective bargaining, supply chain management, which is a very important one, ethics and anti-corruption, data security, sustainable practices, and last but not least, external assurance. Now, this is a recurring theme across all the stock markets, wherein they've adopted the guides which are published by GCC. And barring a few KPIs, I think the theme remains the same. You will see the similar structure when you talk about ADX as well, wherein you see some of the KPIs increase in case of social, some reduced in case of environmental. Moving on to the UAE climate laws. Now, UAE has got three primary laws related to climate. First one is yet to be implemented, which is the Federal Decree Law number 11 of 2024, also known as the UAE's Climate Change Reduction Law. As part of this law, all public and private sector entities within UAE are to adhere to this particular law, which gets mandated on 30th of May 2025. Now, as part of this law, it requires companies to monitor and report their emissions in line with the guidelines. So, for an example, when you talk about guidelines, in case of listed entities, we already have guidelines either from ADX or DFM, as well as the SCA's requirement of integrated reporting. For private entities, there are no guidelines, but they can go with global reporting frameworks to do their sustainability reporting, or adopt GHG protocol to monitor and report their emissions. It also requires them to develop reduction strategy, reduction in terms of targeting energy efficiency, use of renewable energy, carbon capture, utilization and storage, and last but not least, carbon offsets. And from the date of analysis, it requires the companies to maintain the records for at least 5 years with access to government for audits. Now, all of this is required to avoid any penalties. The penalties are ranging from 50,000 AED to 2 million AED, with repeat offenses subject to higher fines. So this is one of the major development that is going to happen in UAE, and it is going to redefine how climate action is taken up by the companies within UAE. There are other regulations not directly applicable to companies, which is why I'm not going to talk about them in detail. These are UAE's energy efficiency standards and labeling scheme and federal law number 6 regarding the peaceful use of nuclear energy. Now, with respect to UAE's climate law, these are some of the things that the companies can do to avoid any penalties. The first thing is to develop a comprehensive GHG inventory, including scope 1, 2, and 3. So it is very important because till you don't know what is your emission right now, you will not be able to project what is the reduction that you're going to achieve in the next 15, 20, or 30 years. Most of the companies are targeting net zero, and for that you need to have a comprehensive GHG inventory to develop your baselines. Ultimately, you have to monitor and report your emissions. Once you've developed a comprehensive GHG inventory, you can set medium term and long term goals. Medium term could be 2030 or 2035. Long term could be 2040, 2050, or even 2060, aligned with your company's goals of net zero. This also requires you to develop an action plan for reduction on offset. This is the right time to do so. And once you've done that, you also have to invest in the capacity building at your company, training the stakeholders in terms of what is ESG, what is sustainability, what are the ESG regulations, and how can they contribute to uh, the ESG action plan of the company. Last but not least, conducting climate risk assessment to identify material issues. This is also very important. You should know what are the issues which are material to your company, and you should have mitigation strategies planned for it. Now, quickly talking about the net zero progress at UAE as well as all the goals. So net zero target for UAE is 2050. It is considered to be average primarily because of the coverage. The coverage is not complete. It is under 95%, and it does not include several sectors like international aviation and shipping, and which is the reason it is termed as average by climateactiontracker.org. With respect to NDC targets, the 2030 NDC target states that UAE will reduce net GHG emissions to 182 metric tons of CO2 equivalent. Again, this is considered as insufficient. The policies and action are considered insufficient primarily because all of this does not align to 1.5 degree climate model, and which is why it is said that it needs substantial improvement. The reason I am bringing all of this right now is if UAE decides to go for 1.5 degree C alignment, that is Paris Agreement alignment, then significant amount of regulations, laws uh, will be seen from the UAE government. This is something that the companies, both private and listed, should be ready with. And one of the main thing that you can do is do your GHG inventory, plan for net zero, and put mitigation strategies in place as that you're already ahead of the curve. So that is something that is very important for companies right now. Let us move on to other countries. The Sultanate of Oman right now. In case of the Sultanate of Oman, we've got the Muscat Stock Exchange MSX, which is also part of the Sustainable Stock Exchange Initiative. MSX talks about ESG disclosure guidelines for listed companies. This is a set of 30 metrics which should be reported to MSX. Now, these guidelines or disclosures have become mandatory starting 31st of March 2025. That means in 2025, 2024 data has to be published. So all the companies listed on MSX have to publish their matrices or MSX 30 matrices uh, to MSX. Now, this can be done in alignment with GRI, TCFD, or SASB, which are globally recognized frameworks. And if you're preparing your sustainability report, it has to go on the company website. At the same time, the MSX ESG 30 metrics has to go on the MSX ESG disclosure platform. That is very important. Moving on, when we talk about Oman, the net zero target is 2050. Along with that, there are other targets related to GDP and energy use, environmental performance index, share of renewables, non-oil revenue and GDP, non-oil share and GDP. So you can clearly see that Oman has done a very good job in connecting the GDP as well as climate targets. This means it is clearly telling companies to integrate sustainability into their business practices. And that is the same theme that you can see in all the regulations or strategies. The two key ones here are National Strategy for Adaptation and Mitigation to Climate Change. This is for the duration of 2020 to 2040, as well as Oman Vision 2040. Let me quickly talk about these strategies, and particularly from the angle of how they help in achieving net zero by 2050. So the transition clearly indicates that the country has to talk about reduction in carbon emissions to achieve net zero target by 2050, and this is possible by setting in different targets for all the sectors. Now, in case of Oman, what they've done is they've identified the top five emitters, which is the industry, oil and gas, transport, buildings, and power. They've also identified that these are the five sectors which contribute to over 95% of Oman's emissions. And what they've also done is they've set in targets for 2030, 2040, and 2050 in order for the reduction that these industries or these sectors should achieve. Now, this clearly indicates that companies, uh, both public and private, can align their emission targets or emission reduction targets with the sectoral reduction targets. This is only possible when they work on their GHG inventory and say that they are targeting, they're putting their targets in terms of net zero as well as scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emissions. So very important, I think that Oman has done a very good job in guiding the individual sectors in reducing their emissions. Let's move on to Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. In case of Saudi Arabia, we have got the Saudi Exchange. Saudi Exchange, again, part of the Sustainable Stock Exchange Initiative, has got a ESG disclosure guidance document. Contrary to the ones before, the disclosures are voluntary, but they are recommended. So there's no mandate in terms of disclosure. At the same time, you can go for international ESG reporting frameworks. Of course, this is something that the companies can do to in order to be ready for climate action, for inviting more investors, be ready for the world. Companies can report in three formats. They can have a standalone sustainability report, or they can have a financial report which is clubbed with material ESG factors. These material ESG factors, of course, come from the ESG disclosure guidance document. And lastly, it can be in the form of an integrated report. When we talk about Saudi Arabia, we've got the net zero target as 2060. There are, of course, other targets. So they've got 2030 emission reduction target of 278 million metric tons per year by 2030. They've got the target to plant 600 million trees by 2030 and 1 billion beyond 2030, clubbed with rehabilitation of 74 million hectares of land by 2030. This is also supplemented by protection of land and sea, wherein Saudi Arabia has target of achieving 30% of the kingdom's land and sea under protection. Particularly with respect to net zero targets, which is to be achieved by 2060, it is considered as poor by Climate Action Tracker, primarily because of the low coverage and because the architecture and transparency is not up to the mark. They have not yet declared their NDC, so 2035 NDC targets are not yet submitted. And the policies and action are considered as critically insufficient. So this indicates that they are not aligned with 1.5 degree, limiting the warming to 1.5 degree. In case Saudi Arabia aligns with 1.5 degree, I think they'll have to do a lot more work, and this means a lot many regulations and stringent disclosure regulations for the companies, both listed as well as private. So, provided Saudi Arabia moves in that direction, I think companies should be ready for that. Let's move on to the state of Qatar. Qatar has been spoken about a lot very recently in terms of how they've hosted FIFA as a net zero event. Qatar has got the Qatar Stock Exchange. In case of Qatar Stock Exchange, they are also part of the Sustainable Stock Exchange Initiative. Here, the disclosures are voluntary but are recommended, right? Again, the three formats of reporting can be adopted. Qatar doesn't endorse specific sustainability reporting standards, but you can go with the internationally accepted ones, which is GRI and IR in most cases. With respect to the goals as well as major laws, they don't have a net zero target, but they do have emission targets. So they plan to reduce GHG emissions by 25% by 2030. They've got a renewable energy target of 4 gigawatt of renewable energy by 2030, clubbed with the expansion of their LNG production to 127 million tons annually by 2027, uh, primarily because LNG also can be considered not a renewable source, but at least a cleaner source of energy. Lastly, protecting land and marine areas. They've got a target of 30% of Qatar's land and marine area to be under protection. This is supplemented by restoration of 30% of degraded natural habitats. Moving on to the state of Kuwait. In case of Kuwait, we have the Bursa Kuwait as the stock market. They have released the unified direction for a sustainable future, a guide in 2020. The guide mandates the disclosure of uh, uh, KPIs related to sustainability, and this is something that was notified in February of 2025, wherein um, financial year 2025 data will be disclosed in financial year 2026. So starting 2026, FY 2025 data has to be disclosed. So the companies have got some time, and I believe they should start collecting the ESG data right away. Again, companies can use the three formats for reporting. As notified in the guide, 30 sustainability indicators are recommended to be included when preparing their sustainability report. Again, GRI, TCFD, or SASB, SASB can be utilized for reporting. Now, in case of Kuwait, we don't have a net zero target. In terms of law, we just have the new Kuwait 2035 Kuwait National Development Plan, which primarily focusing on reducing carbon emissions by investing in renewable energy production. Moving on to Bahrain. Uh, in case of Bahrain, we've got the Bahrain Bourse. Uh, it also has a guideline, which is Bahrain Bourse ESG reporting guideline, very comprehensive one, came out in 2022. Here, the disclosures are voluntary, they are not mandatory. Companies can use any of these format to report. There are 29 sustainability indicators which are recommended to be reported when preparing the sustainability report. It can be reporting can be either in the form of GRI alignment or integrated reporting. Talking about net zero target, they don't have a net zero target, but they do have the economic vision 2030, wherein sustainability is one of the guiding principles. We are not covering all the countries because we cannot do that for all the countries in the interest of time. So what we have done is we have listed down all the things that we have covered for other countries over here as well. You can see their net zero targets, any other targets that they have, which is related to climate, the stock exchange, and whether it is part of the sustainable stock exchange initiative or not, whether ESG reporting is voluntary or mandatory, and if there are any major climate laws available. Finally, we have also included if they have submitted their nationally determined contribution. So here you can see on this page, we've got Cyprus and Israel who've got the net zero targets. Nobody else has got net zero target. These have at 2050. On the next page, we've got Jordan, Palestine, and Turkey who've got the net zero targets as 2050, 2040, and 2053. Many of them are part of the SC initiative as well. So I request all of you to actually look at these regulations. We'll share this report or share this presentation at the end of this webinar. Let's move on to a more important question. You know the regulation now. How do you tackle ESG reporting? So we'll talk about the ESG reporting in a bit. This will be very useful for someone who is just starting out as ESG manager or want to understand what happens in ESG reporting. For somebody who's very advanced or mediocre in terms of sustainability or ESG, this could be a refresher. Now, when we talk about the steps for first-time ESG reporting, we have got 5 steps. The first step is the disclosure. has to take when helping the company that they're working for. So the very first thing that somebody does is check regional regulation. I think that is something that we have covered already in the previous presentation, in the previous slides. So what you actually do is you check basis your country and your sector. What are the ESG disclosure regulation available to you? This can also differ if you are a public sector company or a private sector company, or it could also differ with respect to what industry that you belong to. Thereafter, you conduct materiality assessment. In the materiality assessment, you primarily identify the ESG issues that are material to the company. Once you've identified these issues, you go on and develop a GHG inventory. This is something that is common. I think emissions and energy and emissions something that is material to almost all companies. It is very important to develop the inventory for all three scopes, which is scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3. Many times people skip scope 3, which is not something that is recommended. Please make sure that all three scopes are inventorized. This is also important from the perspective of developing baselines. Once you have these baselines, you know, and it becomes easy to develop the climate goals, right? You can compare with respect to your country's targets, your industry targets and whatnot, or what your peers are doing, for an example. So the next step is to set climate goals based on the baselines, based on the nationally determined contribution of your country, your sectoral targets, like we saw with Oman, for an example, and also with board's ambition. You can clearly set your climate goals. This can be a net zero target, reduction in emissions, or it could be targets with respect to KPIs, which are part of social or governance as well. Now, once you've set your climate goals, you go ahead and develop a mitigation plan. So you know your baseline, you know your target. Now you have to develop a mitigation plan in order to reduce or offset your emissions. So this is something which is very important. You'll have to track the progress with respect to whatever mitigation plan you've devised in line with whatever targets you've taken up for all the KPIs that you've chosen, or rather all the material issues that you've identified. Now, moving on, once you've developed a mitigation plan, you start collecting your ESG data. You compile everything in the form of an ESG report. Now, this ESG report will be as per the framework that is recommended by by your country. Uh, if you're a listed entity, probably you'll have to adhere to a few more requirements. For an example, in case of ADX or DFM, you've got the individual requirement by those stock markets, which also come into play. Finally, once you've developed an ESG report in line with the requirements, disclosure requirements, or if there's nothing available, what you do is you go with reporting frameworks, GRI, IR, SASB, TCFD. Right. Once you've done this, you go and do or you conduct the assurance. There are two types of assurances, which is limited assurance and reasonable assurance. Reasonable assurance is a more comprehensive one, wherein the auditor understands your company, your culture, the controls and risks. In case of limited assurance, similar practices are there, but the assurance is limited to only a few KPI which are selected for assurance. Finally, once you've done this, you publish your report either on a platform which is recommended by the company or your website, wherein you can publish your ESG sustainability report or an integrated report. So I hope this is understood by everyone in terms of what are the various steps for ESG reporting. Let's take an example of a public bank in UAE, and however, it is not common, but a public bank in UAE would already be doing sustainability reporting. But let's assume that they're doing it for the first time, somebody they've assigned this task to. So what that person will do The person will first check the regional regulations. We'll go through all the steps that are listed above. In the UAE, there is the ADX, which has got its own reporting requirements in the form of 30 KPIs. Similarly, DFM has got its own ESG requirements. And through ACA, there is a disclosure requirement of integrated reporting. So basis where you are listed, for example, if you are listed in ADX, you have to adhere to both SCA as well as ADX. So the ESG metrics that are recommended to report, you have to do that as well, and integrated reporting has to be there. Now, once you've understood that these are the requirements, you go ahead and do your materiality assessment. You can take up GRI 3, wherein material topics are available. You identify the material topics which are relevant to the company, include the key stakeholders in the process of developing this, and take feedback from them. Many times what happens, we choose a material topic which we think is relevant, but it actually is not, or it can be the other way around as well. Once you've done the materiality assessment, you've identified all those material topics which are relevant to the operation of the company, or which could, or there are risks associated with it if you don't adhere to it. For an example, GHG emissions, there can be something, if you don't address your GHG emissions, then of course, negative action is expected. Moving on to developing GHG inventory, you develop your scope 1, 2, and 3 inventory and develop the baselines. This in turn helps in identifying or setting the climate goals, which is net zero target, scope 1, 2, 3 targets, renewable energy targets, and any other targets relevant in E, S, and G KPIs. Having developed the climate goals, you move on to develop mitigation plan. So you talk about energy efficiency projects, you talk about renewable energy projects, you talk about safety targets, and anything that is relevant to all the material topics that are identified during the second step, which is materiality assessment. Once you've done this, you develop the ESG report. If you are in UAE and you are listed in ADX, you adhere to both integrated reporting and you include the 30 matrices that are part of ADX. Finally, you conduct assurance. Here in this case, it is expected to conduct at least limited assurance, if not reasonable assurance. And then you publish the report on a platform recommended by the authority or your website. So these are all the various steps in terms of doing your ESG reporting. Very important for somebody who's just starting out. We can have a deep down session of how individual items can be addressed. Probably that is another session that we can do. But this is something that covers or helps a person to get started with. So we've covered both. We've covered all the regulations, which is the first step. If you don't know the regulation, you don't know what all steps to take up. And we have also covered, once you identified the regulations and you know what you have to do, what are the next steps that you can take. So that's all with respect to the regulations and ESG reporting. Let's talk about Sustainium and how we can help you. Now, in terms of the offering, Sustainium offers full ESG compliance services. We handle your data collection, we handle the calculations, we handle the reporting for scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. All of them aligned to either global mandates or regional mandates, for an example, UAE, Saudi, etc. With respect to disclosure ready reporting, our platform and team together work towards to deliver this service. So for an example, for India, we already have the BRSR platform wherein somebody can use the BRSR platform for preparing their ESG report. In the Middle East, we'll do it for you, right? Uh, so we can give you tailored reports with respect to UAE climate law, ISSP, CSRD, and more. We help you implement strategy through our strategy implementation tool. We can have benchmarks in terms of your emissions. We can help you set your reduction targets. We can help you track your progress with dashboards. which are tailored to your sector or your region. Um, then we also help you design, you know, so, so apologies. So we also want to point out that we are designated for Middle East organizations. We provide support for Arabic and English. We provide regional is emission factors and tailored dashboard that you can utilize for multi-site or multi-subsidiary setup. If for a company there are multiple sister concerns, joint ventures, or anything else which are part of your company, I think our tool is best suited for that. Lastly, we are built both for consultants as well as companies, right? We help both sustainability consultants or large enterprises through the tools as well as the services at any scale. So that is what Sustainium offers. We want to take care of everything for you so that you don't have to. If from carbon accounting, which is the starting, as we saw in the ESG reporting, uh, to the ESG reporting, right? We help you with everything. So we will do everything for you. Sustainium intends to become your end-to-end compliance partner. It can be in any region, Middle East, India, US, all the regions are covered by us. We've got experts who can help you strategize your ESG requirements, look at the materiality assessment, look at what you have to do with respect to preparation of the ESG report, and ultimately, publishing your report. So we've got all covered over here. So we want to take care of everything for you. You can reach out for end-to-end solutions for ESG. Now, all of this we provide through a team of experts as well as through the tools that we have. Here in this case, I'm quickly showcasing you uh, the the carbon accounting tool that we have. So it's not just a carbon accounting tool; it's also a carbon tracker. Now, um, in particular, we want to highlight that we have expertise in scope 3 emissions, which is a big problem when it comes to companies, wherein they want to understand first what is their scope 3 emissions and put a mitigation plan in place for reduction. So we help you with both. So overall, we want to say that we are an end-to-end services. We can do carbon accounting, we can do ESG reporting, we can do anything that is related to ESG. I think that's about it that I wanted to cover in this webinar. Um, Feel free to ask any questions. You can raise your hand, you can unmute, you can also put in your questions. Um, in case you're not available right now or you want to reach out to us later on, you can also email to us at hello@sustainium.io. We'll move on to questions now. Thank you.